that the contracted company has questionable credentials and the project cost is unclear and inflated.
Hawa watu wanahangaika hapa katikati watafute kazi nyingine ya kufanya kwa sababu ile tulipatiwa na wananchi wa Kenya hiyo tutafanya.
Railway tender attracts more disapproval as government is pressured to revoke it.
The 47 counties should be left so that we can see whether they can help us as a country.
Governors vow to fight back attempts to reduce the number of counties. And food sufficiency. Just what will it take to ensure Kenya is food secure? Samburu residents flee their homes as KDF intensifies manhunt for bandits and illegal arms.
KTN Weekend Prime with Yvonne Okwara.
A very good evening to you. This 26th day of January 2014. It is the start of yet another week and the last Sunday of the month of January. Thank you so much for joining us in our bulletin tonight. And it is Sunday. That means it is Checkpoint. And today, as you've seen, the tweets on social media will be carrying forward the discussion we had yesterday when we had the Mwingi Central Member of Parliament, Joe Mutambo, to talk about his bill to reduce the number of counties. But we'll be going a little deeper into that conversation today and taking a look at the economic viability of devolution and if this is the way to go or not. Of course, you've had the varying views on that. Our panel today fully constituted. It's a full house today, so we'll have John Mbadi, who's the MP for Suba. We'll have Johnson Sakaja, the chair of the National Alliance Party, and Professor Edward Kisiangani, our resident political analyst.
KTN Weekend Prime headlines.
In association with Kenya Airports Authority.
That the contracted company has questionable credentials and the project cost is unclear and inflated.
Hawa watu wanahangaika hapa katikati watafute kazi nyingine ya kufanya kwa sababu ile tulipatiwa na wananchi wa Kenya hiyo tutafanya.
Railway tender attracts more disapproval as government is pressured to revoke it.
The 47 counties should be left so that we can see whether they can help us as a country.
Governors vow to fight back attempts to reduce the number of counties. And food sufficiency. Just what will it take to ensure Kenya is food secure? Samburu residents flee their homes as KDF intensifies manhunt for bandits and illegal arms.
KTN Weekend Prime with Yvonne Okwara.
A very good evening to you. This 26th day of January 2014. It is the start of yet another week and the last Sunday of the month of January. Thank you so much for joining us in our bulletin tonight. And it is Sunday. That means it is Checkpoint. And today, as you've seen, the tweets on social media will be carrying forward the discussion we had yesterday when we had the Mwingi Central Member of Parliament, Joe Mutambo, to talk about his bill to reduce the number of counties. But we'll be going a little deeper into that conversation today and taking a look at the economic viability of devolution and if this is the way to go or not. Of course, you've had the varying views on that. Our panel today fully constituted. It's a full house today, so we'll have John Mbadi, who's the MP for Suba. We'll have Johnson Sakaja, the chair of the National Alliance Party, and Professor Edward Kisiangani, our resident political analyst, right here on Checkpoint. And all of that is coming up later. Any thoughts you have regarding the reduction of number of counties, the proposal to do that is, please do start sending in your comments on Twitter. And the hashtag we're using tonight, as always, is Checkpoint. You can also get in touch with us on SMS. The number is 22155. But first, let's get to our top stories this evening. A group of Kenyans have now written an open letter to President Uhuru Kenyatta, asking him to suspend the ongoing process to construct a standard gauge railway from Mombasa to Malaba until all sticking points are addressed. The three, former anti-graft czars John Githongo and PLO Lumumba and Tom Mboya, have warned that the Chinese-funded project could have negative effects akin to those of Goldenberg and Anglo-leasing scandals. Meanwhile, Jubilee leaders led by Deputy President William Ruto have vowed not to be cowed by corrupt individuals out to derail government projects, insisting that nothing will stop the railway project. KTN's Ben Kitili has the latest.
The row over the multi-billion shilling standard gauge railway project is simply not going away. Following questions that have been raised over the project's tendering process, three individuals, anti-graft crusaders PLO Lumumba, John Githongo and Tom Mboya, have written an open letter to President Uhuru Kenyatta. They want the president to suspend the project.
Therefore, respectfully urge Your Excellency to immediately suspend the project and to make all documents germane to the railway contract public for scrutiny.
The three warned that if unchecked, the standard gauge railway row could bring back ghosts of the infamous Anglo-leasing and Goldenberg scandals.
It is better to have a delay of 6 months and have something that has value for money than to allow the program or this particular scheme to go on under this shadow of corruption.
However, Anglo-leasing credentials or not, the Jubilee government will not hear any of it. Jubilee insists that the standard gauge railway project set to connect the port town of Mombasa to the border town of Malaba will go ahead.
Hawa watu wanahangaika hapa katikati, watafute kazi nyingine ya kufanya. Kwa sababu ile tulipatiwa na wananchi wa Kenya, hiyo tutafanya. Na hatuwezi kuwekwa mateka na mtu yeyote.
Ile kandarasi ilipeanwa, ilianza process for last 8 years, ikikanzoliwa leo itaanza za ngapi mpaka tupate reli before 2017?
The Jubilee leaders have continued to point fingers at reported power brokers and corrupt influential individuals that are allegedly out to derail government projects.
Kama hawa watajaziwa pesa kwa mfukoni na reli haitajengwa, we will not stand with you, because that is not what we promised the people of Kenya.
The two House majority leaders again urged the executive to name the said powerful forces behind corruption in government.
Tell the people of Kenya through the official spokesman, sijui kama ni waziri fulani, akuambia hawa mabroka ni kina nani. If you don't do that, mimi, Duale, Murkomen, Sonko, Kanini Kega na wale wengine tutaitana hapa, tutaangazia wa Kenya au mabroka ni kina nani.
With time running out for the construction of the standard gauge railway, along with so many questions and corruption allegations raised over the Chinese-funded project, the government is at a crossroads, quite literally. Ben Kitili, KTN.
A devolution row is in the offing between governors and members of the National Assembly over an attempt by MPs to reduce the number of counties from 47 to 14. Mwingi Central Legislator Joe Mutambo says this will be a key agenda when the House resumes next month. However, the move has received opposition from senators and governors who say MPs should keep to their mandate and stop frustrating devolution. Angel Katusia now reports.
Mr. Speaker,
it is apparent now that the supremacy battle between governors and MPs over the running of county government is still on, with the recent plans by Mwingi Central MP Joe Mutambo to introduce a draft bill in Parliament whose enactment could result in reduction of the number of counties, senators and members of the National Assembly. Governors and senators have immediately opposed the move by the MPs. Isaac Ruto, who is the chair of the Governors' Council, has told off the MPs and urged them to stick to their roles and leave governors to implement devolution as Kenyans wished when they passed the current constitution.
Kenyans voted and they agreed that their counties are 47.
The Mwingi Central legislature wants the number of counties reduced from the current 47 to 10 or 11, and the number of members of National Assembly from 349 to between 180 and 210. The reduction of counties would effectively reduce number of senators to 10 or 11. Senators say they will not support the move.
Kile kitu kiko na umuhimu ni ya kwamba the 47 counties should be left, so that we can see whether they can help us as a country kumaliza umasikini mashinani.
And if you read the constitution, for you to do that, you have to go to a referendum. If there's no referendum, you cannot change.
County governments have, however, been on the spot over misuse of county money. A report by the Office of the Controller of Budget indicated that during the first 3 months of 2013-2014 financial year, counties spent a meager 7% of the money available to them on development, while splashing billions on hospitality and personal payments for county staff and members of county assemblies. According to the report, more than half of the 47 counties, 27 to be exact, did not spend a single cent on development during the quarter between July and September 2013. A number of county governors and assemblies have also been accused of approving budgets with huge allocations for extravagant projects, such as construction of governors' mansions, foreign trips, and purchase of vehicles. The county government have even more challenges. Their move to impose taxation on county residents have been met by protests from residents and critics from section of MPs and even senators. And with the Council of Governors expected to appear before the Senate Finance Committee over county budget and spending on Monday, the governors say they will not heed to summons. According to Mutambu, all these challenges raise questions over the ability to deliver the economic promise of devolution, stirring growth in the grassroots, hence the call for the reduction of the counties. The Constitution created 47 county governments based on the demarcation of administrative districts as created under the Provinces and Districts Act of 1992. According to Chapter 16 of the Constitution, any proposed amendment to objects, principles and structure of devolved government must go through a referendum. Angel Katusia, KTN.
Let's move to matters of food security now, and the president wants farmers to embrace new technology and ideas to boost food production. President Uhuru says small landholders can have higher yields if they try out new farming ideas. Uhuru and his deputy William Ruto toured one such farm in Athi River. Osquest Farm is adopting the area's black cotton soil to farm sorghum and barley. Even as the president explores options for food security, some argue that his government is dwelling too much on agriculture and ignoring the pastoralists.
At the National Cereals Produce Board in Eldoret, the first 100,000 tons of DAP fertilizer have just arrived. In total, 142,000 tons of assorted fertilizer will be distributed to farmers in various regions at subsidized prices. The government's hope is that this move will boost production this planting season. But maize farmers in Transmara need a lot more than the subsidized fertilizer. There's been an outbreak of a viral disease affecting maize plantations. Acres of crop have been wiped out and farmers left counting their losses.
Ukishaenda panda tu, baada ya kupata mafuno unataka kufuna mahindi, unapata katikati kabla mahindi yaanze kubeba yale mtoto yake, unakuta sasa ugonjwa inaanza kufahamia.
As farmers in Transmara chop down their deceased crops, fears of heightened food insecurity are growing.
Right now, we are in what we call alert stage.
The government has already issued a drought alert And yet again, the worst-hit communities have been advised to give up their livelihoods.
We have actually alerted the governors that they encourage the people to destock, to reduce the number of animals. We have also ensured that KMC can also start taking in some of these animals so that the pressure on pastures is reduced.
Analysts, however, fault this approach by the government. A policy paper on livestock by IGAD shows just how valuable pastoralists' livestock can be to Kenya's economy. The research found that livestock is 150% more valuable to the country's GDP than the current estimates. The study concludes that Kenya's livestock can match up to economic value of crops and horticulture combined.
Livestock is gold. If you put the right infrastructure, it is more profitable than any money that you'll do with irrigation. Our highlands, the places where there's a lot of water next to the rivers, our irrigation so far have not succeeded. Ahero, Burra, all those ones. And yet, immediately people think of, it's a drought, why don't you irrigate?
Pastoralist interests are substantial in every conceivable way. You cannot think of Kenya without thinking of the pastoralist communities.
The African Union says its focus this year will be seeking to create inclusive frameworks for agricultural growth to tackle hunger and poverty.
The discussions around Agenda 26th will continue to inform our common position on the global post-2015 development agenda and other global negotiations.
For President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy, the challenge of food insecurity is staring at them right in the eyes. Their predecessor, Mwai Kibaki, tackled one of the worst droughts in northern Kenya back in 2010. Uhuru and Ruto's next decisions will be keenly scrutinized as northern counties begin to feel the first pinch of food insecurity. Ashamwilu, KTN, Nairobi.
Hundreds of mothers and children in Baragoy have fled their homes to take refuge in the mountains and caves following an ongoing disarmament exercise by the military. Residents are accusing the government of using excessive force in conducting the operation. Local leaders now want the government to aid in returning the locals back to their homes.
The sights and sounds of the Kenya Defence Force's heavy machinery, so loud and big that they sent the Baragoy locals fleeing for safety in the mountains and deep caves. Well, according to Baragoy residents, the real reason as to why they opted to flee was the disarmament exercise, which has installed so much fear among the locals that homesteads have been left empty as women and children migrated with their livestock.
Na kwa sababu area hii hakuna bunduki ya haramu, japokuwa tuko na ile bunduki ya Omenga peke yao. Kwa hivyo wakati walikuja tulieleza kwamba hatuna chochote.
However, in the hideouts, the women and children are experiencing hunger as they can not only access food but also water and medication. Samburu North Member of Parliament Alois Lentoimaga has urged the government to ensure that all the locals who have fled from their homes are traced and returned to their homes. He also pointed out that the criminals suspected to be in possession of the 42 guns which were stolen from the slain officers are still on the run, posing danger to local residents.
Kama mali kama Suyan, Masikita, Wasorongai, Atakawa, Marti, wale watu wametoroka. Turudishe hao kwao.
Since the operation commenced, no government gun has been recovered except for 2 illegal guns, a Mark IV rifle, AK-47 and 52 rounds of ammunition. Ian Wafula, KTN.
Nairobi Women Representative Rachel Shebesh says she will not forgive Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero after an altercation that ensued between the two in the governor's office last September. Shebesh said what happened between her and the governor was not only an assault on her, but to the women fraternity in Kenya as well. She said Kidero should first ask for forgiveness from the women of Kenya before asking for forgiveness from her.
Mimi hapana broker, lakini mimi kwa sababu Nairobi ni kubwa kushinda Kidero, kushinda Sonko, kushinda Shebesh, naombea msamaha Mheshimiwa Shebesh kwa yale mambo yalifanyika, na kwa niaba ya wanaume kuanzia vijana naombea msamaha governor. Nairobi ni kubwa kushinda hizo makesi zenu mavideo na drama kila siku kwa magazeti.
I don't have to be taught forgiveness by brokers ambao wananiambia Shebesh forgive Kidero. Forgiveness I was taught by my mother who is a reverend. And I know how to forgive. In fact, women, we are the best forgivers. Ni kweli ama si kweli? But you know what happened to me did not happen to Shebesh. It happened to the women of Kenya. It happened to the women of Nairobi. And so I'm saying, as you ask Shebesh for forgiveness, ask the Kenyan women also to forgive you.
2 weeks ago, Talo Oil announced another major oil discovery at Amosing 1 and Ewoy 1 exploration wells in Turkana County. This puts the total discoveries at 600 million barrels, with the potential of rising to 1 billion barrels. However, questions abound as to whether these great discoveries will be reflected in the lives of communities at the resource haven that is Turkana. Betty Kialo reports.
Just 2 days ago, Turkana was back in the headlines for the wrong reasons. 2 children died at Lodwar District Hospital due to malnutrition following famine that continues to bite hard. It is reported that more than 400,000 residents are facing death as they await food relief from government and well-wishers. This has been the story of the now resource-rich region for decades. However, following the major oil discoveries in the last 2 years, residents say that there is a ray of hope. But is it so? October 2013, and Talo is forced to suspend operations in Turkana following protests by residents who lamented that promises of job opportunities and allocation of tenders remained a piped dream.
Imesemekana kuna kazi. Kuna vijana wengi hapo wamekaa jobless mpaka saa hizi. Na wako watu wamesoma, wako na makaratasi zao, madereva, wengine ni wanawafanya kama wapishi, kuna wengine wanawafanya kama watchman, kuna wengine yani kila kazi yote wanyanyiko wako Turkana wako na kazi ya kufanya.
We are not going to discuss about global because we understand.
In a baraza held after the protests that saw Turkana community leaders and officials from Talo Oil hold talks, a list of expectations was put across.
Tunataka Talo andike watoto wetu wale amemaliza shule. Alafu Talo tunataka Talo alipie sisi shule. Tena Talo asaidie sisi achangie mali pado hajachangia shule, Talo tunataka achangie sisi. Mali pado maji hajapikia, tunataka Talo achimbie sisi maji ya kisima.
Everywhere we go, the expectations that the community have are the same. We try to look at the opportunity that we can give, and we try to see how we can fairly distribute that opportunity.
Late last year, a deal was brokered between the government and Talo Oil to allow for smooth running of the operations. In the deal, Talo Oil pledged to regularly share information about tenders and employment opportunities with local communities. Talo Oil also committed to awarding a lion's share of tenders to the locals. Additionally, the British firm pledged to double its social investments to 340 million shillings annually and offer more training scholarships to enable locals take up high-cadre jobs. There are a number of success stories when it comes to business enterprises working together with local communities. In Mombasa, for instance, the booming tourism industry has seen improvement of living standards of communities that live around hotels and other giant investments. In a school tucked in the heart of Ukunda, a class is ongoing. This is Leisure Longway Secondary School, where girls from poor backgrounds get to have a chance to stay in school through the goodwill of Leisure Lodge Hotel. Through corporate social responsibility, the hotel ensures that education for these young girls who passed in their KCPE examinations does not come to a halt. Mariam Chengo is one such beneficiary. She tells us that her parents who struggle to put food on the table would have definitely married her off after KCPE examinations.
I was getting the required marks above 300, but the in terms of fees at home. My parents surely could not afford to educate me, but I'm very happy because it is just like lucky to be at Rondwe.
After school, Mariam takes us home where we find her parents and her 2 siblings. The rundown home and parents literally struggling to make ends meet portrays a heart-rendering situation. However, for Mariam's dad, Chengo Mangali, her daughter going to school is an immeasurable gift. He tells us that she's the only one who can improve their lives.
Angekuwa nyumbani kama sikupata msaada, ningekuwa nimempeleka na nini? Na sina pesa.
Another hotel making a difference is the Diani Sea Lodge, where a big chunk of hotel employees come from the neighboring communities. Here, the young adults are taken through an apprentice program, which leads to employment.
We have already the locals not only on the junior level. We have quite a number of them, who are as well in the management level.
These scenarios provide a great example for the good that may be enjoyed by Turkana residents, many of whom desire to be self-sufficient and sustaining. Betty Kyalo, KTN.
The warring clans of Mandera have signed a peace agreement after successful talks between elders, political and religious leaders from the 2 communities. The meeting also resolved that all adhere to a ceasefire document signed by leaders from the warring clans last July. Displaced residents have now been asked to return to their homes.
We are all in agreement as the 2 communities, and we are letting Kenyans know that there is peace in that part of this country and they are welcome to invest. As the leadership, we are committed to ensuring that the model we have used works completely and it can be used elsewhere.
Right, we want to take a short break right now on KTN Weekend Prime, this 26th day of January 2014. But after the break, you know what's coming up. It will be time for Checkpoint, and today we'll be taking a look at the reduction of counties. There have been protests all over the country over county taxation. Complaints about governors misusing funds. Is reducing the number of counties the way to go? Will it solve the problems that we're seeing within the devolved system of government, or are MPs enemies of devolution, as has been claimed in some quarters? All of that with our fully constituted panel tonight on Checkpoint. Remember, the hashtag we're using is Checkpoint, and you can also get in touch with us on SMS. The number is 22155. We will see you after the break. Welcome back. This is Checkpoint, and today we're talking about that bill that is set to be tabled in the House when it reconvenes next month by Mwingi Central Member of Parliament Joe Mutambo, whom we had here last evening, talking about reducing the number of counties. There has been outcry from members of the public over just how much this is costing the taxpayer. Is reducing the counties the way to go? Will it make it a little easier on your pocket? Today, our panel is with us to talk about this. Let's start with you, Prof. What do you think of this idea of reducing the number of counties from 47 to about 9?
It is a political conspiracy by some people within the political establishment to derail devolution. You cannot explain why they are doing this. And the enemies of devolution are not just in Jubilee. The enemies of devolution are both in Jubilee and even CORD.
Interesting.
And
Interesting statement.
And these people have been determined to focus on the mistakes or the problems that the counties are facing. The reason why I'm telling you is this. If you go to the counties today, Yvonne, they are faced with a lot of problems, including having MCS who do not have the intellectual sophistication to handle budgets and other things. Mm-hmm. They have just been in the office for a few months, mm-hmm. But instead of helping to set up institutions to make sure that the counties work, every other day you are hearing stories about mm-hmm. counties not performing.
Right.
So really the reason why I'm saying this is not because I have any bone to pick with anybody, but what I'm saying is that there is a lot of wastage in the national government. Nobody's talking about it. Since 1963, you have had the problem of Kenya is the problem of national government.
So we should also be focusing on wastage in the national government and not just
they are
at
the
the
first
county
one
level?
to point out wastage. They have the power to do legislation to control what happens in the counties. They have done legislation which is not right, and they have released somebody called the control of budget to delay development in the counties. This is not acceptable in my opinion. So what is supposed to be done is that you must put the house in order in government and in the National Assembly.
All right.
And once you do that, this problem will go away. And what is happening, just before my colleagues come on board, Yvonne, when you reduce counties from 47 to 9, the idea is to constrict administrative, democratic, and political space and increase centralism. And very many people have this disease, the endless disease. In fact, it's a terminal disease of centralism, and they are not going to do away with it, and they are stopped by the public.
All right. We had the Member of Parliament here yesterday, and he said, and I will paraphrase, that, you know, if you're heading down, you know, you're in a journey and you're in a vehicle and you discover you're lost, you don't carry on until you get to the destination that you did not want to go to. You stop, you correct yourself, and you get back on the right path. Do you agree?
Thank you very much, Yvonne. First of all, please allow me to really correct Prof. When Prof says, and I'll ignore it so that we start on a good note, that the enemies of devolution are not only in Jubilee, but are in court as well. I don't know where it's coming from. Jubilee has nothing against devolution. We support it fully.
So the enemies of devolution
and even
would be
in as much as the person pushing it is a member of CORD, I don't want to look at it as a CORD or Jubilee issue. It's an individual member of parliament with all the rights as a legislator to bring that legislation. I must say that we must think of the principles that govern devolution. Devolution is anchored on the principle of subsidiarity. Subsidiarity means that a service is best offered at the lowest level compatible with the benefit area. For a long time, Kenyans have said that because services have been centralized and development, many parts of this country have lagged behind with respect to development. And when we came up with the counties, really, people are starting to see things that they have never seen in many parts of this country. So reducing the number of counties for me, and that is my opinion, would be going against the very principle that underlies
So
devolution.
on that, you and Prof agree?
We agree, but when he says that you believe enemies,
Right.
you know, it's neither here nor there.
All right.
But the point is this. There needs to be a very honest and objective discussion around the economic viability of a lot of these units. I was a consultant to Parliament in 2010 when they were coming up with a lot of the laws which are now in the Constitution. And when it came to coming up with the number of counties, because they could not agree and this document needed to be passed, they settled on the districts of 1992.
Yes.
That is why you cannot explain why certain counties, which were created maybe for political reasons by the then regime, exist as counties now. Why the Higa is a county?
I would like to...
I think Yvonne, let him not walk away with this, because he's saying, we go to the economic viability. This looks like the password, the key word for those who fight devolution. He says he doesn't want the devolution to go or the counties to be constricted, but he's now raising the same issue, the acid thing.
But is it not a fair point, Prof, to talk about that? Because
what I'm saying, Prof,
I want to raise this matter so that he responds.
All right.
The point is this. If you look at our national constitution, it says that at least 15% of the national budget should go to the counties. Now, how do we raise 85%? Some of the governors do not have the training to do fundraising. It means that, yes, and I know some. I know them. And what is supposed to be done by national government is to facilitate governors to understand how to raise the funds that will cover up to 85% of their individual budget.
All right.
I'd
like somebody to...
Let me respond to that first.
Very quickly, okay.
Yeah? Because I think today the professor needs to be taught. One,
they are always being taught. They are being learned. They are learning daily.
One, Prof, this is nothing to get emotional about. When I say that there needs to be a real discussion, it's because the issue has come up. And we need to actually question. If I ask him what was the rationale of the current counties, I'm sure there's no answer. Because I was there, he was not there. But the point is this. any effort to reduce the number of counties, in my opinion, and I'm a big champion for devolution, Prof. I've written about it from 2010, and I have a book on it with the ICJ.
Should go.
The real thinking about devolution is to give services to the people at the lowest level possible. You see, so that if it's health, let people be able to get health services.
Okay.
The problem that Mutambo is trying to sort out is the fact that governors have spent a lot of money on personal issues, on personnel issues, on building
foreign
their own,
trips, building their own
foreign trips,
homes,
building mansions,
like that. Okay.
and that is not the real. We are not devolving power
At this point,
as much as we're devolving.
Understood. At this point, we'd like to hear from Mbadi from
Thank
Mutambo
you.
Hills.
First of all, let me remove this notion that members of National Assembly are fighting devolution, or rather that this bill that is proposed, I don't know whether it is even a bill yet, is having the blessing of National Assembly per se, or any side of coalition. Let me put it this way. I think the problem that Mutambo is trying to raise, and which many Kenyans talk about, and which Prof will not run away from, is that it is very expensive to run the governments that we have. But I thought Mutambo would engage his mind a little bit more to ask whether we have done enough to save costs at the level of devolution that we have at the moment. Rather than proposing constitutional amendment, there are steps that can be taken to cut on costs. I want to give you an example. If you go to our counties today, we made a provision in law, not through the constitution, to create village administrators, for example. You come to my constituency, which is not very big. You will have 40 village administrators. The question is, do we need them? That's not a constitutional provision. This is through an act of parliament. We can legislate and reduce the number of village administrators and have even 9, because I have 9 locations. So what I'm saying in short is this discussion is good, but the approach is bad. I think what we need to think of is not to amend the constitution, not to reduce the counties, but think of the most effective and efficient way of running those counties.
One of the methods that has been put forward is the Senate is, we know, drafting a bill, and it's being done by Kipchumba Murkomen and Nandi Senator Stephen Sang, talking about the expenditure and trying to put a cap on it and saying that they would like more to go towards development and less towards, recurrent expenditure like that. Is that one of the moves that you think might help us?
Most of the senators who have talked against the governors, most of them are from Jubilee. And that is the point I'm raising, that instead of verifying the counties and looking for every other mistake that has happened in the counties, you should look at the bigger scenario. What is required is what Honorable Mbadi has said. The national government has capacity to legislate. And when it does legislate,
the national government has the capacity to legislate, which they do through the National Assembly. I mean, it is the National Assembly that would make that, which is probably why Mutambo is trying to put something in place regarding that.
You see, when I talk about government, I am not being naive. This is not a trivial talk of nursery school kids. I'm talking about government, and when I talk about government, I think the government has 3 branches. It has the legislature, it has the executive, and the judiciary. So when I talk about the national government, I consciously know what I'm referring to.
All right. Understood. Yes.
Can I just add on to what Prof has said? And I agree with the Prof entirely. Let us do this. You see, the problem we have is the way we have treated counties from July last year.
How have
we need to understand that counties were given money, or rather the bill that gives the counties money was passed in August. And if someone is doing a report covering July through to September, there is no chance of any county having ever embarked on serious development within that period. First of all, development expenditure require a procurement process. So this, to me, I find to be very unreasonable to the counties.
All right,
and
that's an important point.
Let me just add that you can, if you are talking of counties being a government, you cannot cap recurrent expenditure to 40% and development expenditure to 60%. Can you achieve that with the national government? We must understand that county governments are fully functioning government.
In essence, what you're saying then,
we have in the law, we have in the law 30% budget must be development budget. What we need to question, at the end of the financial year, have we spent 30% on development in our counties? And have we spent 70%?
So we should wait for the financial year
and
to
auditing, not someone just
But the
putting a
Auditor
report.
General did have a report.
No, the Auditor General hasn't done a report.
Let me say this.
This is the controller of budget releasing a report of expenditure.
The control of budget, Madam Agnes Odhiambo, has, in my opinion of how she's been working, I do not know her personally. I think she has the best interests of the country at heart. And it's within her mandate to give, a record and
to the expenditure so far.
What is happening.
Okay.
What we're hearing from Kenyans is that they want to see more development in the counties. What I don't agree with Prof is that it's not for national government to legislate on that, because we have county legislatures. The county legislator passes the appropriation bill in the county. And within that appropriation bill, and even other legislation within the counties, the county assembly members can decide to put a cap on certain levels of expenditure. And also the county governments are subject to the Public Financial Management Act. So there's this legislation. But what I'm saying is this: let us urge our governors, because what we're seeing is some desperation to legislate on issues that are not necessarily legal or not necessarily financial, but the issues of character. You want to put a board where the governor has to sit with the MPs and senators. It is good. But why force a governor to consult? Any good governor must know that he has to consult. You understand? Because
so how do we get them then?
Yes, but if you create that and you go against the mandate, let me finish. If you go against the mandate, the executive mandate that a governor has an executive mandate to work on development in a county. A senator represents the interests of the county
at the
Senate.
level, yes.
A member of parliament represents the people of the constituencies. Naturally, these leaders would sit, but there is no way that you can change the mandate of a governor and have somebody else come to dictate to him how to spend his money, unless the county assembly.
I would like to move the discussion, though, to the economic viability of this, because the taxes that we're seeing in the counties, Kenyans are hurting, Kenyans are afraid, Kenyans are scared. Perhaps a lot of them would then support and say, we don't need the 47, we cannot afford the 47. Is that true? Can we not afford 47 counties?
We can afford it. There's a problem here. And I would like to answer your question by taking off from where Mheshimiwa Sakaja has left. The first thing is this: all budgets that the counties are using have been approved by the same person he's praising. Because budgets have to be approved, and if the budget looks outrageous, the control of budget can cross out those things that saying governors are doing that are not right. The second thing is, if you look at our constitution, the fourth schedule of our constitution, anybody who cares to look at that, the fourth schedule of the constitution outlines what the jobs of the national government, including foreign affairs and so on. Section 1 of the fourth schedule talks about. Then Section 2 talks about the duties of the county governments. What is required is now to quantify that in monetary terms and ask governors, how much money do you need to meet these things that are in the constitution, and how much does the national government need? 35 items on the national government, 14 items on the county governments. But because of subdivision, in fact, the work of the county government is even more than the central government, the national government. Now, when you look at that per se, you can quantify and say, how much money do we need? And that's why I am now saying this, that 85-20, it is possible even to increase the amount of money that can be taken to the counties and removed from the central government, depending on how we quantify what is in Schedule 4. And if we don't do that, wait, I finish. And then if we don't do that, we also need to encourage the governors to look for alternative means of raising funds. You cannot ignore that point.
Let me say this.
The national government cannot fund
two things. One, when he focuses on 85%, that is a constitutional aspiration as a minimum. But in the last financial year, and it's out of the budget, it's not 15% of the budget.
Yes.
It's 15% of the last audited revenue. In the last allocation, which was the first allocation ever, 32.5% was devolved to the counties by this very administration which you're saying is anti-devolution. But on top of that, when you look at the principles of devolution, there are a number of things. Number one is expenditure responsibilities, which is true in the fourth schedule. We know what a county must do, what the national government must do. The thing that was not done well, and we must talk about it, was the costing of these functions. The functions must be costed generically, first of all, and specifically to counties. Yeah, we can agree. We're not allowed to agree. Secondly, sorry, let me finish.
Really like
secondly, I'll go quickly. Is revenue raising possibilities and within the counties. Now, when you see governors all deciding to raise revenues from unlikely
With
sources,
taxes,
whether it is chicken
yeah.
and what
Chicken,
taxes,
yeah.
whatnot. You see people who have lacked ideas and creativity on how to raise revenue. Sometimes,
And so how do we correct that?
Sometimes to increase revenue,
The national government has
increasing taxes is not the only way to increase revenue. Sometimes lowering taxes increases compliance, and when you increase compliance, you have more people paying. So we need to see more creativity from these governors. There are many counties, and I have looked and I've done analysis, many counties are actually collecting less than the municipal councils and whatnot that were there before had been collecting. So there's a lot of wastage also within the counties. There's wastage within national government. Then number 3 is when you get the intergovernmental fiscal transfer, which is what they're calling the 15%. That is supposed actually to plug in a deficit, so to speak. And from there you go to subnational borrowing. So I think the principles have been gotten all wrong.
All right.
We need to have an objective look to it.
Okay, Buddy, I know you want to weigh in on this, but there's also the proposal to reduce the number of constituencies. There are far more constituencies now than in the 10th Parliament. What would your thoughts be to that? Reducing them from 349 to about 180?
The 290.
First of all, I'm one of the people who believe that we made a mistake as a country to increase the number of constituencies, especially from 210 to 290, and then yet we knew very well that we were going to have affirmative action, bringing in more women to Parliament. And we have another House of Parliament, the Senate,
The Senate, yes.
and which also has not only the 47 senators, but also the additional 16.
Yes.
So Kenya is overrepresented. We cannot deny that fact. We have 1,450 members of county assembly elected, and on top of that, we have over 600 nominated. Kenya is definitely overrepresented. But I think this is a discussion that needs clear thought and proper. We need to sit down as a country and ask ourselves whether we need this level of representation. But I think the topic today regarding the quick fix of reducing the number of counties is not going to help solve this problem.
Allow me to say, though, when we spoke to the member of parliament yesterday, he said it is not a quick fix. It is something he sees happening over the next 4 or 5 years. So it's not something... You don't believe that, Sakasa?
I call it a quick fix. I call it a quick fix because he's already proposing a legislation. For me, I thought as a country, if we feel... truly, we have... we are overspending on recurrent expenditure on salaries. Let me give you an example. Before the coming into force of the counties, we were spending roughly 400 billion on salaries alone. Right now, it is projected that we are going to spend over 600 billion. The question is that can we reduce that expenditure? This requires dialogue, and this requires a conference. You don't sit somewhere in your room and come up with the legislation and claim to fix it.
Allow me to say, yes, as we get into constituencies, knowing then that we were going into a higher wage bill with 2 houses of parliament, with the members of county assembly, the members of National Assembly then went ahead to increase their salaries, knowing that they were way more than they were in the 10th Parliament. Would the members of National Assembly, in a way of contributing to the growth of counties and to reducing the wage bill, was it then wise for members of National Assembly to increase their salaries?
The queue was followed by the MCE, the county assemblies.
Let me first address the issue of the number of constituencies, because I've participated in that for many years, contrary to public opinion. When Parliament was at Naivasha dealing with the draft from the committee of experts, they called in 2 experts. One was Professor Adwo, a very well-respected geospatial mathematician, and myself at that time. Now, the issue we're dealing with, and which was raised in the Kriegler report, was that there's a lot of gerrymandering with respect to representation. Representation is enshrined on the doctrine of equality of the vote, which means that each Kenyan who goes to vote, his vote must weigh the same as the other person. We had a constituency like Embakasi with 900,000 people, represented by 1 person, while you have Lamu with 20,000 people, both the MPs have 1 vote. So those need to rationalize and have some equality. Gerrymandering was done previously by previous regimes to have more MPs from the areas and less from the opposition. But what we proposed was this, that we can actually rationalize the 210, but we would lose 30 constituencies that existed then. Actually, they would be wiped out. Like Lamu East and West would become 1 constituency. Maybe Mbadi's, Gwasi, and Mbita would not split it, etc. When we said, no, I was a consultant. When we said, and it's an example, when we said that we do that, they said the political cost was too much, and Kenyans, since the constitution was being voted on, this is the time to have that conversation again, to see whether we actually need 290 constituencies, or we can go to less, because they said let us increase the constituency number that does not disenfranchise those who deserve to be split. Because you have constituencies with almost 600,000 people.
Okay, back to then my question. Then, should the members of National Assembly have thought about these issues and not increase their salaries?
Yes, and this is the point that I was raising at the beginning about the government. When the Jubilee government took power, most of us who believe in this country supported the president when he said that the wage bill is already too big and we are not going to accept to have people raise their salaries. The president held on for a few weeks, a few months, but gave in. Now, what you have seen now is that certain people have already fortified their domain and they have higher salaries. Now they are saying, we cannot allow salaries to continue. So to increase. So for me, what I would say is that even if we are trying to relook at the whole question of the number of constituencies, the number of Senate seats probably, and of course the number of MCS and so on, people who are drawing salaries. The crisis that is at play now is the question of distribution of resources in this country. It's a bigger problem. And if we are going to look at that issue very, very seriously, then we have to think. It's not just for Mutambo to tell us that you are going to reduce the number of counties. In my opinion, the starting point is whether or not we want this pseudo-unitary system of government or we want to go fully federal. If you ask me to go fully federal, I will accept the proposal to reduce the counties and we turn them into really big states with governors. Somebody in Navasha messed up this dream.
All right,
So we should go fully federal.
And we must conclude as we go.
The discussion of federal or not really was decided on the constitution.
Okay, that has been decided on.
No, we can still go for a referendum on that.
First of all, let me say this.
Yes,
I wanted to correct Sakaja that my constituency is not one of the protected.
Not protected, I'm saying we will not be increasing anyway.
Okay. Yeah, increasing, I agree with you. I think it is wrong to increase the constituencies. But Yvonne, I think this issue of members of parliament, I think when we are talking about cost of running government, let us look at it in a holistic way. We need not to zero it down to specific institutions. Because if you ask me the question of MPs, I can't remember at what point MPs increase their salary, because that is unconstitutional in my view. I've never seen MPs increasing their salary. If they did, I think that needs to be corrected. As far as I'm concerned,
that is a very interesting statement from you, because we had you here on the breakfast show and we were talking about the
but I never talked of MPs increasing their salary. I only complained about Salaries and Remuneration Commission reducing salaries of people who are already in office. That's what I said. I never talked of MPs. In fact, I would be the last one to ask MPs to increase their salary, because if they do, it's unconstitutional.
But yet you are still a beneficiary of it. Very quickly.
Knowing the salary you are supposed to earn.
Yes, okay, very, very quickly.
As far as I'm concerned, I still earn the salary that was gazetted, the 532,000.
Okay.
Unless someone gives me another salary.
Conclude in about in a minute what you think your solution is and whether you will support this bill should it be tabled in Parliament next month.
First of all, I think this bill is misplaced. In my view, what we need to do is first to understand the counties and not to be emotional about the counties. It is wrong to tell counties not to spend more than a certain amount. Yet we know in the PFM Act, we have already set 30% as development expenditure. And that is what the counties are going by.
Right.
If any county spends more than 70% on a recurrent expenditure at the end of the year, we need to hold that county government accountable.
All right, okay. Sakaja, a minute. A minute. And I know you want to increase the number of counties as well.
I can count the minute. So if
I'll be counting.
Let me say this. Whenever members of parliament, senators, etc. bring legislation, I think we really need to ensure that our focus is on the people. The people voted overwhelmingly for this constitution so that services are brought closer to them, so that the issues can be dealt with at a more localized level. That is the principle of devolution, which we support very well, and I speak even as a chairman of TNA, we support devolution fully. We need to ensure that people can be able to get health services at the closest level, education services at the closest level. We know that there are certain issues with certain governors. Let us not try to deal with personalities through legislation. And finally, really what I must say is that when you look at the issue of constituencies, when you look at the issue of number of counties, let us remember again the principles that informed the creation of laws. I will not support that bill. Let us have an honest dialogue on those very issues that fundamentally are enshrined in our constitution.
All right, okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm so sorry. We're out of time and we really have to conclude at this point. Thank you so much for joining us. That's been Checkpoint for tonight. Thank you for your feedback. We'll be taking a look at that next. It's now time for us to take a short break. And we're taking a commercial break right now. We'll be back with more news.